Hello everyone and welcome to Total Quilter Monthly for February 2021. My name is Mark Garetz and I'm a National Floriani educator, and this month we are going to be covering artwork tools. Now those are the tools that you use to manipulate, combine, weld, intersect, subtract, etc. Various pieces of artwork. And remember, last month we went over the ways to draw artwork and lines and things, and the month before that as well. So this month we're going to wrap up our artwork section with talking about how you can manipulate them with the built-in artwork tool. So let's go ahead and get started with this month's lesson. As you can see, I've got Total Quilter open and I've got my grid turned off, and I did that by coming over here to my grid icon and clicking it. Now I've got it turned off. If I click it now, it'll turn back on, so it's a toggle. And for this demonstration, if I ask you to click, that means a regular left click, and if I ask you to right click, I will specifically say right click. So what I'm going to do is I've come up here to my built-in artwork shapes and I've grabbed a square, and you can see I'm in square because my cursor has a little rectangle by it, and I'm going to draw a square. Now to get a perfect square, if you remember from last month, you hold down the control key while you click and drag, and that confines the shape to a perfect square. When I let off, it creates that perfect square. I'm going to switch back to select mode to select it, and I need to make two shapes because what we're going to cover today only works when there are multiple shapes on the screen, and typically also when they overlap a little bit or a lot. So to duplicate this, I could do a copy paste, but I'm going to use this little icon down here in the left hand corner. That's the duplicate icon. So I'm going to click that, and it's going to make a duplicate of it, and it offsets it a little bit. Now I want to offset it just a little bit more. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to drag it down like that. And then what I'm going to do is change the color of this one to red. So I'm going to come here to my thread color search icon, click it. I'm going to type in the word red, click the find button. There's red. So if I click it, it'll change that to red. And what I want to do is fill both of these shapes so you can see them easier. So I'm going to come over here to my properties box with both of them selected, click fill, and click apply. To select them, I dragged a box around them. Now what I'm going to do is one of my favorite tools, which is zoom to fit, and that is a double click of the magnifying glass so you can see what we're up to a little bit easier. So I've got both shapes selected, and what we're going to do is start diving into our artwork manipulation tools, or our shape tools. And there's a couple ways to get to them. One is to come up here to your menu, and you can see right here, this is our artwork manipulation section. It's defaulted to trim. If I click the little down arrow, I can select between four options: trim, weld, intersect, and exclude. And there's another way to get to these. If I click up here, I'll click off of that. If I right click on the shapes, I can come here to the transform artwork option, and I have the same weld, intersect, exclude, trim in a slightly different order. But I also have a fifth option, which you can only get to with that right click, and that's remove overlapped artwork. And we're going to go explore that in a bit. There's also this one right here, simplify smoothen, and we'll get to that in detail. There's also convert to perfect square and convert to perfect circle. And that does just what it says. I'm not going to even demo those. If you have a misshapen square, a misshapen circle, and you want to convert it easily to perfect, you can just click one of these options. So I'm going to click off of it again. I'm going to come up here to all items, which is another way to select everything. Click that. Going to go to our first option here, which is a trim, and I'm going to click that, and let's see what happens. When I click trim, what happens is you can see over here in the sequence view that it looks like my red shape is undisturbed, which is true, and my blue shape, I've trimmed away the section that overlapped it with the red. So if I come here and I grab just the red and I move it aside, you can see what I've done is I've trimmed this artwork based on this shape. So I have a new shape here and my original shape is left undisturbed. I'm going to do an undo and an undo again to get back to my undisturbed artwork. I'm going to reselect all items. And the reason I did two undos was because I moved one aside and I wanted to move them back. So let's go to the next one. I'm going to click the down arrow up here again, and let's look at weld. Now what weld does is what you might think it does. It takes these two shapes and welds them into one shape. So if I click weld, since there's now only one shape, it can only use one color. So these are now welded together into one shape. And if I turn off the fill and click apply, you can see that it's just the outline of that welding of the two shapes. I'm going to refill it, and then I'm going to, well, I shouldn't have done that because I'm going to do an undo, and an undo to get back to where we were. Now let's do all items again, and I'm going to click the down arrow, and this is called intersect. And what it does is it takes the intersection of this shape and this shape, which should leave a little square, or a little rectangle actually now, that looks like this, where the two shapes intersect. And it's going to leave only the intersection of those two shapes. So let's go ahead and click it. And yes, that's exactly what it did. So I'm going to do an undo, and I'm going to reselect all the items again. Now you might wonder why I'm selecting all items all the time. It's because if I just select one of them, you can see that my artwork tool is right here, and it's grayed out. I can't even use it because this only works when one or more shapes are selected together. So I'm going to click all items again, and if you only have two items and you have a lot that you want to manipulate and you got lots more items, then don't click all items. What you'd want to do is come over here to the sequence view and click the first item, and then hold down Control and click the second item that you want to put together with this artwork tool. So let's go on to the next one, and that is kind of the opposite of intersect, and it's called exclude. So what's going to happen when I click exclude is it's going to take what the intersection of these two shapes are, which is again that little rectangle right here, and it's going to throw that away but keep these two shapes, and those two shapes are going to change based on that. So if I click exclude, you will see that it's exactly what it did. So I've got a shape that looks like an L and an L here, and that is what exclude does. So once again, I'm going to click undo and select everything again. And remember, there's that fifth thing, which is remove overlapped artwork. Remember, the only way to get to that is to do a right click, go to transform artwork, and select remove overlapped artwork. Now what that's going to do is it's going to look here, and it is going to look at just the overlapped part and remove anything underneath. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show you what that does, remove overlapped artwork. And if that looks familiar, it's because in this case, remove overlapped artwork, and if I do an undo and I reselect everything, remove overlapped artwork did exactly the same thing as a trim. All right, so you can see that the result is exactly the same. Now that's not always the case. So what are the differences? Once again, I'm going to do an undo, and this time I'm going to select everything, but I'm going to turn off the fill and click apply. And what the difference is that if I do right now remove overlapped artwork by right clicking, select transform artwork and remove overlapped artwork, guess what? Nothing happened. Okay, it didn't remove any overlapped artwork because remove overlap only works on filled artwork. But if I select all items and I come up here and I select trim, you can see that it did the same thing as remove overlapped artwork, except it did it with an unfilled shape. All right, so that's the difference, is remove overlapped artwork only works on filled shapes. There's another minor difference, and I'm going to click undo, and I'm going to reselect everything, and I'm going to refill those shapes. And what I'm going to do now is just select this red one, and I'm going to make it smaller by clicking and dragging that handle. And I'm going to make them so they overlap. All right, so they're now overlapping each other, and I'm going to select everything, and nothing is hanging out the edge, and this is the key here, nothing's hanging out the edge. If I now click trim, okay, what happened? It got rid of one shape, but it made this one, it kept it, and it kept the original shape out here. So it kept this original shape in here, but it made it the same color as the original. So if I change its color, you can see that I've got the two shapes. But if I drag it off to the side, you can see that it didn't take out what was below it. All right, so what happened is it did something strange. It made them the same color, but really didn't change any of the shapes. So if I do an undo, an undo, and an undo, and an undo, you can see that we really didn't get much by doing a trim when they were inside one another. All right, now that's only if you want to do a trim. If I want to do an exclude, let's say, to make a hole in the shape of the red artwork, if I do that, it will actually work. All right, so you got to be careful with trim sometimes, because if things are overlapping, it does one thing. If they're overlapping completely, it does one thing. And if they're not overlapping completely, it does something different. Okay, so that is the basic artwork functions. And you understand the difference between remove overlap and the other functions, and that the other functions work on filled or unfilled shapes. Remove overlap only works on filled shapes. All right, so that's the main difference. Now let us delete everything. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to press the delete key on my keyboard to delete it, because I want to show you what Simplify Smoothen does. The easiest way to do that is come up here to my artwork tool, select a pen tool, which is this one, and then I'm going to just freehand draw a squiggle. And you could see that I'm purposefully making it with smooth curves and without. Okay, so let me double click that magnifying glass to get it big in the center. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to select it. And let's do the Simplify Smoothen. So I'm going to right click on this with it selected, click Simplify Smoothen, okay, and you can see here I've got a preview of what it's going to look like. And you can see that if I move this kind of off to the side here, you can see that in here, for example, it's a little bit cleaned up, and the other curves are a little smoother. So you can see right here there's this angle that goes like this, and here this curves in. So what this did was it smoothed everything out and removed some of the bumps. All right, now not everything. So let's talk about what these controls do here. I'm going to move it back into the center of the screen. So we've got these three options here. So one is curve precision, one is angle tolerance, and one is distance tolerance. So what do these do? Well, what curve precision does is it determines how closely the path of the original artwork is going to be followed. So less precision, which is what I have it set at right now, 1%, or you can go all the way up to 100%, that follows the original curve more closely. So when you change this slider, you can see that the artwork here changes. So you can see, if you look right here, you can see that that has been smoothed out because I'm down at about 41%. If I come up here to 74, you can see it hugs the original curve a little bit better. If I come all the way up here to 100%, you can see that it keeps the original curves. What angle tolerance does is angle determines the range of angles that it will preserve. All right, so let's go ahead and leave the curve precision at 100, but let's talk about the angle. So look right in here. My angle tolerance is at 60%. If I come down here and 10 is the smallest, you can see the change. So if I come up here to higher, you can't see a change. It's not doing anything. Why? Because my curve precision is set so high. So if I change my curve precision, then I change my angle tolerance down, we should be smoothing out a lot more. All right, it's not having a huge effect here because most of these are smooth curves. So if I come back up here to 100% and I change my angle tolerance back down, it's not having a huge effect with the shape I drew, but that's what it does. And the distance tolerance, what that does is it changes the amount of distance between 2 points that it's going to preserve. So with a distance tolerance of 2, which is the minimum, it's going to preserve a lot of those points. If I change my distance tolerance up to 20 millimeters, it's going to take away a lot more of those points. So if I come down here to a curve precision of 1 and I change my angle tolerance all the way to the bottom and I click OK, and I look at my completed artwork, and if I look at it in artwork mode, and this is a shortcut to do that, if I click that, you can see I've got very few points here. If I do an undo, which will put back the original set of points, you can see that I've got a lot more points here. So if I go redo, so that puts in my changes, you can see that I've reduced the number of points a lot. So Simplify Smoothen is very useful for taking something that you've drawn that's not quite perfect and smoothing it out, or if you do an automatic trace, which in this case would be using one of the magic wand tools, that can help smooth out the artwork a lot. So that is what Simplify Smoothen does, and I invite you to play with that to get your various effects. And of course, once you get it to a certain amount, and let's say you want to change this point here, remember you can always right click on it and you can change the type of point. So you can change it to, say, a symmetrical point, and that will smooth that out. And then again with the handles, you can change what that point looks like. So Simplify Smoothen will get you a long way there automatically, and then if you want to change things, of course, you can continue to modify the original points. For more on that, go back to the lesson that we did December 2020 on drawing artwork shapes and what these nodes, etc. do. So that wraps up our lesson for this month. I want to thank you very much for watching. And I want to invite you to come back next month for our next lesson in Total Quilter.